Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and coming to us from sunny Florida. It's sunny in Utah right now, but it is a little hazy and cold. So he's got the better end of stick there. But his name is Chuck Downs. Chuck Downs is the founder of Downs Consulting. He just likes helping other people. He's had multiple successful careers, but ultimately he found his passion in helping and serving and blessing other people's lives through helping them reach their full potential. And that's really why I wanted him on the show. When I saw what he was and what he's doing, I think it really aligns with the belief, the core belief of Fuel Your Legacy and this show, that you're worth being remembered. And everybody I'm bringing them on to help you identify that belief in yourself. What are you worth being remembered for, and how are you going to take action on that today so that you begin being remembered for what you're worth being remembered for? So thank you so much, Chuck, for taking time out of your busy life to come in here and share with us your expertise, your skills, and how we can become more like Chuck.
Thank you, Sam. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, go for it. If you can share with us your story of how you got to where you are and where you're headed.
Listen, I think where I would start with this would be, not that long ago, a special person in my life named Pam reached out to me and wanted me to read over an obituary that she had just written. And I read that obituary, and after I read that obituary, I texted her back. I said, look, this is beautiful and perfect. And she said, well, somebody said it was too flowery and too long. And Sam, I thought about that. I thought too flowery and too long. And I thought about the woman that this obituary was written for. And I thought about the impact that she had made in her life and the legacy that her life really had, the lasting impact that it had. And I texted Pam back and I said, there are 2 mistakes we can make in life. The big mistake is playing life too small. The small mistake is playing life too big. Which mistake would you rather make? And, I think that whenever we think about life, I share this from personal experience. How many times do we let fear prevent us from being vulnerable and real? How many times do we not share how much someone truly means to us? How many times do we say, oh, it's not the right time. The perfect time is later, and we never chase our dreams. Or how many times do we say, oh, I've got enough in my life, and we don't work as hard and we don't push ourselves and we don't really fulfill our potential. I really do. I think that the big mistake is playing life too small. And that's where the regret comes from. That's where the what ifs come from. And many, many, many times those what ifs stay with us until the day we die. The small mistake that we would make is playing life too big. It's being too flowery or too long with an obituary. It's going after something, maybe a little bit more than we should have or could have. That's the small mistake, and there's no regrets from that. When I was a kid growing up in Clinton, Mississippi, the dads that coach the sports, almost every single one of them were in financial services. And, and I paid attention to that. And they seemed like they were happy. They had great lifestyles. And Sam, they were able to take afternoons off year round and coach their kids' sports. And so I looked at that and I said, man, that's a great job description. And so when I graduated from college, I went into the financial services business in a commission-only sales job with a Fortune 150 mutual insurance company. And, and again, why? Because I wanted to be happy. I wanted to have a great lifestyle, and I wanted to be able to coach my kids' sports in the afternoons. And man, a couple of months after graduation, I found myself, and, I had, my savings were almost gone. I had no clients, no real prospective clients, and I had no desire to ask mom and dad to bail me out. And I found myself, one night sitting in the floor of this $200 a month furnished room that I was renting from this family. And man, I had my bills spread out in front of me, and I had this small pile over here that I could pay, and I had the big pile over here that I couldn't pay. And I was stressed, and I was scared, and I was really overwhelmed. But the big problem was I was taking rejection personally, and my confidence was running low. I didn't know if I was good enough. And I don't know how long I sat there with my head hanging low and crying. But at some point I stopped crying, and I looked up at this bookshelf across the room, and one book jumped out at me. And it was a book that had a red arrow on the spine. And on my hands and my knees, I crawled over that book, and I pulled it off the shelf, and it was a book named See You at the Top by Zig Ziglar. And dude, I started reading that book, and I couldn't put that book down. And the more I read, the better I felt. And 3 things from that book jumped out at me, and were so profound, as profound as Zig would say. It's so profound that here I am 30 years later still talking about it, man. But those 3 things were, number 1, you can get anything in life you want as long as you help enough other people get what they want. Number 2 was, we become what we think about. And number 3 is, you gotta have a vision. And so that night at 2:00 in the morning, I wrote my first vision. And man, it was so simple. And as you might guess, it was all about money, because I didn't have any money. And so the vision was, I help 4 families every month secure 8 policies, and I earn $50,000 a year. And that book had me convinced that if I could just focus on that vision instead of all those distractions of negativity that I had allowed to come over me, then I would be successful. And so every morning I would wake up and I would read that vision. I would see it and I would feel it as if it were real. And as the days progressed, I started feeling better. And man, I was eating pasta and canned tuna. I was putting gas in my car, paying for it with coins from my change jar. But I was feeling better. As I felt better, people started responding better, and people started, giving me more referrals and better referrals. And then on a Friday afternoon, a few weeks later, I had a recently married guy named Rodney say yes, finally. He said yes to a life insurance policy to protect his future family. And we completed an application. He gave me a check for the first month's premium, and we scheduled his medical for the following week. And Sam, it felt like this curse had been lifted, man. I mean, it was amazing. And that following Wednesday, on the day of his medical, the examiner arrived to his house, and he told her that he had changed his mind. He didn't want that insurance. And I got the message later that afternoon. And man, when I got the message, I mean, all that fear and all that overwhelm and all that scaredness just came crashing back. And that questioning, am I good enough? Who's going to listen to a 22-year-old kid about financial planning and financial advice? And I realized, man, I could go home to this little room and I can pack all my stuff. I was living in Memphis, Tennessee. I could pack all my stuff and I could be back home in Clinton, Mississippi in about 4 hours. And I could be in my room, in my parents' house, and I wouldn't have any worries. And you know what? Next week I can go find a job that's going to pay me, so that I can pay my bills and support myself. And it was like, you know what? That's the thing to do. And then I thought, read your vision. And I pulled that vision out of my planner and I read it and I saw it and I felt it and I believed it again. And the very next day, I had a close with a veterinarian and he said yes. And he completed an application. He gave me the check for the first month's premium. He gave, we scheduled the medical, and the following Tuesday, on the day of his medical, he completed the medical, and Dr. Scotchy Davis became my first client as a full-time advisor. And man, I had no way of knowing it at that time, but that would be week 1 of 416 consecutive weeks of submitting business. And that year, my first year out of college, I wrote 48 new clients, 92 policies, and I earned just a little over $50,000, not 51, just a little over 50, which was almost exactly what my vision had been. But man, more importantly than that, really what I discovered was, I discovered that we are not at the mercy of our circumstances or other people's opinions or actions. Those are distractions. And if we allow distractions to drive our thoughts, our actions, our feelings, then we are slowly and painfully killing our power, our passion, and the purpose that I believe God put us here to pursue. And, and so it was like this epiphany that I had, and I've just carried that forward, to today. And, look, life wasn't always easy. I mean, I woke up, a few years later in my 30s and have had a fair amount of success, in my 20s. And, woke up in my 30s with the financial success, but I was stressed. I was overwhelmed again. And what I realized at that point in my life was that a vision, a career-only vision, a money-only vision doesn't really cut it. We need more. We need a vision for each of the important areas of our lives. And when we create a vision for each of our life priorities, and then we've got a plan to help us get to each of those priorities, and sets the course. Because here's the deal that I've learned is that, we're either being driven by past programming, future fear, or present pain. If we don't have a epic vision for our life, it's past programming, future fear, or present pain that's driving us day to day. But whenever we've got that epic vision for our life in each of the important areas of our life, then what happens is now we start living with meaning. We start experiencing magic and magnificence in our lives. But we've got to have that vision for our life. And I like to refer to it as really it's 2 neon flashing signs that we need in our life. We need the neon flashing sign of our purpose, because if you don't have a purpose, there is no way you're going to fulfill your potential. And once you've got that purpose, as a neon flashing sign, constantly reminding you, you're waking up to it, day after day after day, that's your drive. And then you've got that vision, which would be the second neon flashing sign, that vision that pushes you onward and upward, that inspires you, then those are the 2 neon flashing signs that we need in our life to really create the life that we want. Because look, it's like Zig said. Zig said that, the second point was we become what we think about. And, there was a point in time where that was just positive thinking, right? I mean, whenever I hit my goals, my first year in the vision, in the business, I mean, you can imagine 22 years old, had almost quit. Now I'm successful. I mean, 50 grand in 92, that was a lot of money, and so I had to share it with everyone. And the people that I would share it with about the power of a vision, people would say, oh, that's just positive thinking. And intuitively, I knew it was more, because the problem with positive thinking is you have to think about it. And what I was doing, it was changing the way I thought. It was changing the way I behaved. It was changing the way I felt without having to think about it all the time. And today science knows why, because the exercise that sports psychologists and motivational speakers have called visualization for years, today neuroscientists call it self-directed neuroplasticity. And self-directed neuroplasticity is the discovery that we direct the formation of new neural pathways and the destruction of old neural pathways through the experiences that we create. And it doesn't matter if those experiences are real or vividly imagined. And so when we create those experiences, then we're reprogramming our brain, and it's reprogramming our body so that we have new thoughts, new feelings, new actions, and our language patterns change. And neuroscientists say that self-directed neuroplasticity may be the greatest discovery of this generation, and is certainly the most important concept in personal transformation today. And so, to kind of wrap this up and put a bow on it, so to speak, from a standpoint of me and the legacy that I want to leave behind, it's really helping people. It's helping people transform fear into faith. It's helping people, get away from disempowering thoughts, harmful feelings, inconsistent actions, and weak limiting language patterns that are holding them back, and showing them by modeling it in my own life, and then offering a path for how do we transform those thoughts, those feelings, those actions, those words into empowering thoughts, healthy emotions, consistent right actions, and limitless language patterns. And again, the way that I would describe it is I view myself as someone that's here to shine light. I think we're all here to do that. I think we're here to really, discover our internal divinity that everyone has, and to live with our pure potentiality, and again, transform fear into faith. And that's really what I want to do with the work that I get the privilege of doing and sharing with people.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. If your mind isn't blown, you didn't listen intentionally, go back and re-listen to that. So many good things there. I've got a list here. Again, we're not going to get to all of them. So if you want him back on the show so we can have this conversation and actually dig in a little bit deeper, sometimes I feel like I maybe need to start a Joe Rogan experience type thing where it's like just 3 hours long, because there's just too much good things to talk about. Too many things that I think really can benefit. And what's nice is every guest seems to be different and point out different super good things that we need to talk about. So if you want him back, go message me on Instagram, Facebook, comment on the YouTube video, whatever, and we can get him back on the show. But think about, I'm just going to go through these and pick out the most important things that I think an audience can benefit. But I've done practices where you actually, so in your case, you read somebody else's obituary. They kind of spurred this thought, but I've done like coaching when I've been at retreats and stuff where they say, hey, write down your obituary, write down your ideal obituary. Mm-hmm. Do both. Write down your current obituary, what would people currently say about you, and then write down what you want them to say about you, and contrast those. And that's a fascinating, mind-bending experience, and just super like, oh, wow. Like, that's a very real experience. Like, if I died today, what would my 3-year-old son and my 2-year-old son say about me? Would they remember me? When they're 16 and whatever, would they remember how I interacted with them? Do I interact enough that they're going to remember those experiences at 2 and 3 years old? So that's something to, like, I don't know, every time I talk about something, I need to spend more time with my family. Hear about friends getting divorced, I need to spend more time with my family. Like, I just can't even handle how important it is for me to make sure that those are in alignment, and I can do better. So I'm grateful for you bringing that up. And I love the 2 biggest mistakes and the 2 small, like, they're not the big mistake and the small mistake. I haven't really ever heard it put that way. But I've had a similar conversation with my wife, because my wife has this dream inside of her that she's terrified she'll get rejected for. And she sees other people who think they're better than her. And so she has not chased it yet. She started to dabble her toes in it.
Good for her.
Which is good. And I'm
Good
sitting
for her,
there
man.
trying not to push her in before she's ready, but totally want to push her in. And that's as a coach, because now how many years have you been coaching now and developing people?
Well, I retired from financial services in February of 2017. So as a profession that pays my lifestyle since 2017, I took a couple of months off, but the end of the spring of 2017, coaching clients as a certified financial planner, coaching advisors that I recruited and developed, since my 20s, so almost 30 years.
Sure. So how do you gauge that? And we even had a little conversation before we went live here about some of my own things that I'm on the fence about. But how do you, as a coach, how do you know? Because this I think this conversation, and the reason why I'm digging in here, it applies to parenthood. It applies to sports teams. It applies to religious groups. It applies to every aspect of life. It applies at the gas station when you're helping the attendant. It applies to everything. Anytime you're communicating and trying to influence an idea onto somebody for the betterment of the world and them and you, then it applies, I think, this rule. So how do you know when the right time is to just push and instead of just lead them down and let them come to it on their own? Like, what's that balance? I really suck at the leading, honestly. Like, I'm much better just like, hey, here's what should happen, bam. And they're like, well, I'm not ready. Well, come back when you're ready and I'll shove you again. And so that's Sam's in position. I'm learning leading. So I want to know, how do you know the difference of when to do what?
Well, listen, first of all, I think that's one of the great differences between a shrink, a counselor, a psychologist, psychiatrist, and a life coach, right? Is, if you're a counselor, you can't ever do that. You just have to sit and listen and everything's for them. As a coach, man, you can kick them, you can push them, you can push them in that direction. So that is one of the great differences is coaching, you push someone into something. How do you know when? Look, I think it's intuitive, at least it is for me, it's diving in deep. It's finding out from them. It's asking them, when do you think would be the best time, to go for it? And then asking, and so if they say, well, I think, look, I should start, doing this in a year. Okay. Give me the benefit of your thinking on why you think a year is the right time. What's the cost to waiting a year? And just diving in deeper. And then the majority of my coaching, they do come to the conclusion, but it's because I'm asking questions, leading them and making sure, because sometimes it does make sense to wait on decisions. Yeah, it totally does. And sometimes we're just doing it out of fear. And so I think that's one of the big things is, again, whenever you say, what's the benefit to doing it? If there's no real benefit, or the benefit is just kind of fluff and you realize, well, they're not making that decision because they're afraid. Well, that's where it's the push. Then you give them the push.
Yeah, I think
I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. And in my experience, I found that there's an energy transfer there in that questioning process that if you, as the coach, mentor, parent, whatever, if there's at all an inkling that you're pushing for your benefit because you need something out of it, whether it's you need your kids to go to bed or you need them to eat their dinner because you want to go do something more fun, or you need your client to pay you money and so you're going to push, like if there's any level of an energy transfer of you need this more than you're trying to help them, one, I think it's unethical, but yep. Two, even if you do manage to get that done, it's probably going to charge back on you. It's probably going to kick you in the butt. It's probably going to explode later. Even if you strong arm your child today, when he's finally big enough to not care about you strong arming, it's over. No that's a zero sum game.
No doubt about it.
And so it's an
agree 1,000%.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to, Zig said you can get anything in life you want as long as you help enough other people get what they want. So as long as you're it's the golden rule, right? I mean, you put other people first, and then everything works out. Even if the perception is that it didn't work out, you can bet your bottom dollar, it did work out. Always put others first. Mm-hmm. No, and I said that. So the way that I said it, I do want to say, I don't necessarily believe that. In this small little tweak is I do feel like we have to put our own spiritual health, our own emotional health, and our own physical health first as a priority in order to serve others. And so like my mother, God rest her soul, passed away in 2004. She was a caregiver for my grandmother, and she started neglecting her own health, and she passed away a month before my grandmother did.
Oh, that's terrible.
Right? And that happens a lot with caregivers. And so, we have to, there are certain things that we should put ahead of everything else, I believe, in order to serve the world. I'm not putting it ahead of myself for my own pleasures or my own gain. I'm doing it so that I can serve the world to the very best of my ability. I can't be the best father that I can be if I'm emotionally drained, if I'm physically drained, and I'm spiritually bankrupt. Those have to be some priorities. So again, sorry for the
no, I like the
rabbit hole.
I had to smile when you said the book with the red arrow. I literally have it on my shelf, and as soon as you started describing it, I was like, I know that book. He's going to say "See You at the Top" by Zig Ziglar, and sure enough, that's so funny. So question though, and not necessarily for you, but for the audience, what books do you know so well that you're so familiar with that when somebody describes the cover of it, you know exactly what they're talking about? Like, if you don't have books like that, especially amazing, incredible influence, like, I don't know what the Harry Potter books look like because I don't read Harry Potter, but if somebody describes, a black cover with some white on it and red, what do you think of? Okay, primarily black, little faded images. There's two books that come to my mind, right? Not because I know them because of me, but because I have family who know them intimately, right? 50 Shades of Grey and Twilight series. Like, they're primarily black covers, a little bit of red, a little bit of white, faded images. So it's like, that's one book, but he had to say red arrow on the spine. Bam. I knew exactly what book he was going to talk about. So if you aren't that familiar with successful books, I would get that familiar. Like, really start learning what that is. A green book with a pink strip down the center. What's that book? How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, right? So it's like, those are books that if you're not familiar with, I would say get familiar with. So anyways, I thought it was very fascinating. I never realized that I recognize books by their cover. That's
funny. That's a great insight.
But I think that's really funny when you start describing it that way. Also, I just want to compliment you, and I wanted to dig this out, but I'm going to choose to use my time elsewhere. But Chuck is a masterful public speaker, storyteller, influential speaker, all of that. Like, very good. I don't know how many times he's practiced telling his story. But if it's anything like me, it's thousands of times he's gone through that story by himself, in front of his dog, in front of the mirror, in front of a group of people. Like, there's a science, and I'm not going to use my time to dissect his story, but there's a science to how he told that story. And as somebody who has been through the speaking industry, it's so cool to watch somebody else methodically execute a perfect speech. It's a beautiful thing for me to witness. So I just want to let you know how incredible that was for me, not just because of the story, but because of the execution and the time and effort I know must have gone into that to creating the perfect experience for every listener of that story.
Can I tell you a real quick story, since you did say that?
No,
really quick is that, and thank you for that. And you're 1,000% right. There's, if you look at Joseph Campbell, the hero's story, it's all about, there's a formula to movies, there's a formula to screenplays, there's a formula to books, there's a formula to telling a great story, 100%. And I think we owe it to the people that we get the privilege of sharing with to know how best to communicate that. And last week I had two big talks to organizations, and I'd spoken to both of them at the end of last year. So it was their end of the year meeting. And so they invited me back. And so, I needed another keynote. And so I needed a big finale. And I've had a story that happened to me, and it's a heavy story. And to be able to tell it the right way, I hired a screenwriter to help me. He interviewed me. He interviewed the hero of the story, and it always left about 1/5 of the audience flat. And I didn't even look at it for a year. And 2 weeks ago, I pulled it out and I said, all right, maybe I can fit it in. Maybe something will tweak. And I moved one little piece of the story. I moved it from the end. I moved it to the beginning and did a reveal earlier than I'd ever done before. And it just absolutely crushed. And it was, and this will be my TED Talk, God willing, because it's a powerful story. But I've literally gone through over 100 variations of that story. I have practiced it, and it's around. As best as I can tell, it's somewhere between 800 and 1,000 hours on that one story. It's about a 12-minute story, but again, it's you picked up on it and you nailed it. We owe it to our audience to really know. And again, that's going to be our legacy, right? Is what do they remember you for? Were you able to grab their attention? Were you able to make your points? And so we got to be as great as we can at telling that. So sorry, that was probably more than a couple of minutes.
No, I love it. I think that for you listening, because here's why I do the podcast. Though this is like, for my, if I was going to charge somebody $50,000 to coach with me, one of the things, or multiple of the things they would get would be a short video. Well, it starts off with, what are your stories? Let's identify those stories. Let's show you and do for you kind of, after we do the interviews, let's do for you, create children's books of your stories so that you have something to pass to your generation. So they're reading your life experience, your stories in an impactful, pointed way to get that across. Then a video reel of those stories. It would be I already have it written out. I don't charge for it right now and haven't really advertised it, but I think your individual stories, just because you think, I haven't had these amazing experiences, the fact is you're alive and you've had your experiences. And those, just like this is where I think so many people misunderstand the public speaking industry as a whole. But just as much as somebody may go invest in real estate or may go buy some other form of investment, the way I view my stories, every story that I can tell in 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or an hour, right? Depending on how much detail and time I have, those are assets. And the more money and time I've invested into developing those assets, literally, if you open up my spreadsheet, those are assets that I have that I can share. And they have a dollar number by them, because to get that asset, to be able to produce the right value in return, you've got to invest into it. I didn't hire a screenwriter. That's a good idea. I never thought of that, but I definitely have hired coaches who have gone through my speeches and speechwriters, and they've torn my speech apart, said, hey, you need to shrink this part. You need to expand this part. You need to use this type of colorful language. You need to use this type of imagery language. Almost down to a percentage of equation of how to construct a perfect speech. And they're assets. People think, that's a nice story. No, that's an asset that costs $30,000 to develop. And that's why I'm giving so much love and energy to your story, because it's so valuable. And I'm so grateful that we got to hear that for quote unquote free. And you shared that asset with us for out of the good of your heart. And I'm deeply grateful for that experience.
It's an honor. It's an honor. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Yeah, no problem. I want to give everybody, so if you're listening to this and you feel like I have some assets that I'd like to share, please take the time, reach out to me. I want to help you share those in a way, and not everybody's ready initially, so we work with them a little bit to get them ready to share it on this type of platform. But I just really, really respect that aspect. Oh my gosh, that took longer than I thought. Okay, so I just love this conversation. So one of the things that I love, 3 questions that I don't know that you really asked, but you kind of highlighted them in your story, but I want the audience to ask themselves. and you can give some more input on this. But one of them is, I'm going to use a weird language here because it's industry language, but a chargeback, right? Anytime you're coaching or you charge somebody money and then they decide they don't want to do it, the right thing for most part is to give their money back and say, okay, fine, go on your way, right? Not always. Sometimes that's detrimental to their progression if you refund their money, especially in the coaching industry. People are like, I didn't even use it. I'm like, well, this will be a very good lesson for you then. If I give your money back now, then I'm teaching you to give up on yourself. And if you learn nothing else from me, it's not going to be that. So like, I don't know. It's sometimes the keeping money is not because you're greedy. It's because it's the last ditch effort to teach a valuable lesson. And that's another fine line. That's just like, it's an intuitive thing. You just got to know your people. But how would you invite somebody, let's say you're sitting there across the table from them and you're inviting them to think of who is their first chargeback? Who is their first person that they thought, hey, I'm winning, and then crush? Like, how would you guide somebody through the process of identifying that in their own life?
I would probably ask them, what's your biggest disappointment? You know, what's something that happened in your life where you thought that you had wanted something, but then you realized, oh, I didn't, because someone changed their mind or someone backed out or someone reneged on a deal. Because that is my first chargeback in the financial services business. But, when I think of my first, chargeback, and I mean, Sam, I haven't thought about this in years, but I remember a guy that we had a deal that we were going to work on something together, and he made it out that we were going to be partners on it. And then whenever I found out that we weren't in fact partners, I was the employee. He gave me a fraction of the deal that he got. It was like, oh man. And I was in high school, and it stung because, I felt used. And it gave me the real insight that, you know what, ask more questions. You got to have a deal before the deal. Don't just, and again, from his standpoint, I'm not sure that he thought that he did anything wrong, and I'm not sure he did anything wrong. He might have phrased it in exactly the right way, and I interpreted it wrong. So, that was a valuable lesson that has, that stayed with me now for years. So that's the first chargeback I can remember. So that's what I'd ask is, what's the first time that you thought someone was going to do something, they said they were going to do it, and then they didn't do it. What was the lesson from it?
Yeah, I love that, because I think that is such a crucial question to ask yourself in every aspect of life: marriage, family, parenting, business, everything. What's that time, and what did you learn from it? The key question is, what did you learn from it? It's great to reminisce about old things, but like, if you're not thinking about what you learned from it, then it may just show up again in a not great position, right? So what did you learn from it? How are you going to act differently as a result of that experience? I think is crucial. And then this is a Sam thing for me, because I coach people, and then they're like, well, if this person did this, and they start complaining to me about however somebody else is showing up in their life. And it goes from people who are brand new to people who are experienced leaders, been leading groups of people for years. Like, how do you just not get frustrated when somebody does this? And the answer for me is, I choose to get compassionate over getting frustrated. Because the reality for Sam, again, I can only speak for myself, is I can't think of any point in time where I'm getting frustrated at somebody else that I have not shown up exactly that way to somebody else in my life at some point in time. Like, so rather than getting frustrated, I choose to get compassionate and understanding. That doesn't always mean, just because I'm compassionate and understanding, that doesn't always mean I don't demand better from people, right? Because there's a level of, okay, I can understand that, and the performance is still subpar and non-satisfactory, and we need to improve on it, right? Now, if you choose out of improving, then it's over, right? We walk our separate ways. But I think there's a balance there of recognizing, I choose to be compassionate over frustrated. And that's a better, more peaceful, at least way for Samuel to live his life than for others. I'm curious how you would explain that conversation in your language.
For me, I'm very clear on the emotions that I want to experience in life. And I'm very clear on the emotions that I don't want to experience in life, and frustration and anger and animosity and things like that are just not emotions that I want. And so why would I allow someone else's actions to cause me to feel that way? Because then I'm giving up my power, I'm giving up control. And the reality is that people that do anything that I would perceive as being harmful to me, I mean, is it really? I mean, are they really harming me? No. There's something inside of them that's causing them to do that. And so, again, I mean, it's so funny how often I quote Zig, but Ziglar said, if you treat everyone that you meet as if they're hurting, you'll be treating the majority of the people correctly. And so if someone does do something to, quote, harm me, they're not doing it because they're this, super confident, loving, grounded, internally lit, divine being in that moment. It's because they're hurting. It's something going on in their life. And so why am I going to allow something that's going on negatively in their life to adversely impact me? I would rather say a prayer for them and send them love and light, and just wish them well than get upset. And again, it's easy for me to say that today. I mean, I've been on this big, spinning planet for over half a century now. I mean, that wasn't me 10 years ago. That wasn't me 20 or 30 years ago. This is what I've learned. And does it work all the time? No. Does it work the majority of the time today? Yes. Thank God. Because the times that it didn't work that way, it almost broke me. I mean, life has a way of if you keep on acting this way, we're going to keep punching you in the head and kicking your, everything part of your body until you learn the lesson. That's the lesson that I've learned is it does mean no, I don't want those emotions. I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to stay in the light. And again, that works for me the majority of the time. And whenever it doesn't, then that's a lesson. And it's my way of realizing, all right, there's still work to do. And I think there's always going to be work to do.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. I get that. That's probably one of the most common compliments I get from people, which is I never set out for this to be the compliment, right? But it's fascinating that it's turned in that way. Is like, you never get upset. You never get frustrated. You never seem like anything's upset. And it's like, we all have the experiences where stuff happens in everybody's life that causes a trigger. The question is, for me, because of you use the more scientific language, but because of me rewriting my neural pathways, then it's become a faster process to go from frustration to gratitude than for you. But when I sit down and I magnify glass, I actually created a journal for this called Identify Your Identity, Redefine Your Defining Moments, specifically for this to help people go through, hey, what are the facts? What factually happened? How do those facts make you feel? Or how do you feel about the facts? What could also be true about the facts? Let's brainwash ourselves with the best possible intentions for everybody involved. And then what did I learn, and why am I grateful that I had this experience?
Love it.
And those questions, if I have a magnifying glass of my day, I'm asking myself those questions all these times. And for me, when something happens, when somebody cuts me off on the freeway, you better believe I'm like, hey, my wife, my kids are in the car, I'm pissed. But within seconds, before I even recognize that this computer system process has happened, what's coming out of my mouth is, man, I sure hope he's okay. I hope he doesn't make any other people unsafe. I hope that he gets to where he's going, right? Because that process happens so fast, but that process has been getting shorter and shorter over 12 years of running that same system. So to think that somebody's going to walk in and have that system, and in 2 months they're just going to be like that. It's like, no, that wasn't my experience anyways. So I'm right there with you. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I was not at the same position I am today. So now it's effortless. And I think that kind of ties into what I wanted. The last thing I want to point out here is the difference between positive thinking and being vision driven. Positive thinking takes effort. Being vision driven is effortless. Okay, talk more about that and share with us kind of the contrast between the effort that it would take to be a positive thinker and what somebody who's engaging in positive thinking, what does that look like? What does their day look like? What is that process? If a negative thing happens, how do they reframe it? And then the difference of being vision driven.
Yeah, so neuroscientists tell us that the average Western world inhabitant has over 50,000 thoughts per day. And, if you think about it, so, we become what we think about, which means that we're the architects of our life. And look, that's not something we have to convince ourselves of. I mean, psychoneuroimmunology, epigenetics, neuroscience, they all say that, our thoughts are the blueprint of our mind. So we're the
architects. Still deny it for some reason.
Say it again.
I said some people will still deny it for some reason. It's too much for them to handle that's a fact, and so they're just like,
look, God bless them. That's where they are, and I mean, it is what it is. God bless them. The reality, and you and I both know it, and I'm sure that all of your listeners know this, is that our thoughts are, the blueprint of our mind. I mean, whenever we're thinking happy thoughts from a scientific standpoint, so those people, I mean, when you look at happy thoughts, gratitude, love, abundance, release dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, and that has a certain chemical reaction in our brain and body. And whenever we're thinking thoughts of anger and frustration and resentment and hatred, we're releasing norepinephrine, cortisol, and adrenaline. And so that's just science. And so if anyone that wants to deny that, I mean, okay, go ahead. I mean, just who cares? but we're not talking to you. We're talking to the people that recognize it. And so we're the architects of our life because we become what we think about. Now, 50,000 thoughts per day. The problem, Sam, is there's over 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts that we had yesterday, and last week, and last month, and last year. So that means that we're on autopilot. Okay, so we're architects on autopilot, driving our lives not by design, but by default. And so, if that's the case, positive thinking, well, the thinking that we have is wired into our brain and body, and it rests behind the subconscious mind. So that, just thinking positively isn't enough. It's not enough. What we have to do is we have to create, again, what I like to say are the neon flashing signs. And so that neon flashing sign that constantly reminds us to think more of what we want. Because if it's true that we become what we think about, then the key to getting more of what we want and less of what we don't want is to increase our percentage of thoughts on what we want, which by default decreases the percentage of thoughts on what we don't want. And so if you're always having to think about it, what are you going to think about? Well, you're going to think about what you've been wired to think about. When you've got a vision, and that's a vision that you can read and see and feel every morning, every night, throughout the day, is something that's real and tangible. Now you're being driven by that vision for your future, and you get really, really clear. And whether it's a vision board or mind movies or, whatever it is, to get crystal clear on that and not have to rely upon, okay, life is good. I can do it. It's totally different. And the positive thinking doesn't really come with the elevated emotions. Okay, and so to actually make the change in our brain and in our neural pathways, it's got to be a thought and a feeling. Without the feeling, without the elevated emotion, we don't create the change in our neural pathways. And so just positive thinking doesn't carry the needed and necessary energy of an elevated feeling to make the change in our brain and our body. Whereas a vision, a properly worded vision, I've seen a lot of visions that people write, and I'm sure you have too, where they're actually written where they're preventing the person from achieving it. And so whenever we've got a properly written, properly worded vision, or a vision board, or a mind movie, or whatever it is that really paints the picture, both the things as well as the feelings, and who you want to be, what you want to do, what you want to have, what you want to give in your life, then that is something that will drive us and push us onward and upward. And it becomes ingrained in our brain and in our body. And you wake up one day and you look around, it's like, oh my God, this is my vision. I mean, I'm living, I'm reacting, I'm responding, and I am showing up as the person that I wanted to become. And positive thinking just, again, it's like kind of the ground level, right? I mean, having a vision that's driving you is the next level.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that having that vision, everybody needs to have it. There's no way around it. There's no shortcuts either. There's no pretending that you have a vision. I know for me, it's like, that's what it happens in all areas of life, but I explain it in my, right? Because this is another thing that I love about talking to people, is we're all coaches and we all have our own like cultish language of how we describe things, which I think is valuable because it helps people understand your lingo. For me, I would describe it as really having fulfillment and understanding what that fulfillment is, and getting clarity on that fulfillment so that you're in a fidelity, as high a fidelity as you can with that vision. And then we say, okay, this is what we want, rather than thinking, oh, I have to stop watching TV. I have to stop doing this. I have to, all these things that we're cutting out. And this happens on the financial side, on the relationship side, rather than thinking about all the things you have to cut out. That's the first step, is people start thinking, oh, well, you mean I have to stop this and this and this? I'm like, nope, you don't have to stop a dang thing. All I'm doing is holding up a mirror based on what you say you want, and then showing you what your actions are currently giving you, and then giving you the option to place your efforts, time, money, everything into things that you actually value more. And if the result is that after clear analysis, you don't actually value your vision more than your current lifestyle, then accept that. Stop making excuses that you just don't get paid enough. You just whatever. No, stop making excuses. You're accepting where you're at, and that's okay. Like, that's the first step to actually being willing to change, is accepting where you're at and stop making it somebody else's problem. And so the value of saying, okay, what do I value most? And then intentionally placing my time, effort, resources into what you value most, that's the way to have the highest fidelity between your vision and reality. And oftentimes reality and your vision, those will, in my experience, those will always, and I don't generally say dominant words like that, but they will always become into fidelity before the facts of what actually is happening on the ground comes into place. Your reality must feel like what other people, your lifestyle and what everybody people see, you have to feel like a stranger in factual circumstances, because your reality is so much advanced, and you have to feel like a stranger in your own life so to elevate your life. Very rarely does it happen the reverse, where you feel a stranger in your circumstances because your vision wasn't there yet. That's a very rare circumstance among the highest performing people I know. Can it happen? Yeah, you might have some random kid who gets drafted into the NFL or something and like never expected it, and now that happens, but it's not very frequent. Even at that level, they've been envisioning themselves in the big league since they were 6 years old, playing as if, wearing jerseys, pretending to be the man before they ever got there. Yep. And so, anyways, it's a very intricate thing, but I think you're always going to have the fidelity and reality before your circumstances reflect it.
I like that a lot.
So super excited for this section. So this is a legacy on rapid fire. It's going to start now. What do you believe is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy?
Well, it's the guy in the mirror. I mean, it's my own fear of, can I go to the next level? And so the thing that I'm always doing is I'm always pushing and asking myself, what's next? What's next? I mean, I just I just launched a course July 1st. That was something that, what's it going to be like and all this stuff. And so I ended up, having to go out and hire a team to help me, with the mechanics of that and the behind the scenes. And now I'm launching a course for new advisors where we're going into organizations and signing them up for a program. And that was something that, did I want, I was kind of afraid of, do I really want to be obligated to speak to people, that often? And do I want to have that many people? This is going to be, at some point in the near future, it's going to be thousands of people on a call. Am I cool with that? And so, a year, 2 years ago, I was not. Today I am. So it's just, it's always the man in the mirror. It's always the woman in the mirror. There's outside, nothing's holding us back. Everything's inside. So that's the biggest thing standing in my way. It's always me.
True. And what do you believe the hardest thing you've ever accomplished has been?
Being a father has really, really just transformed me. My kids are 20, 17, and 15. And a couple of years ago, when the first teenager happened, it's like, all right, I can handle this, and then it was two of them, and then it was 2-on-1, and then when my daughter became a teenager in the first instance where it was all three of them attacking me, I realized I can't do this. And so my need to control and my need to be right all the time and my constant judgment and always needing to be coaching and telling them what to do and what not to do, I got to have faith and I got to back up and I've got to accept and I have to love unconditionally. And so the toughest thing for me has been practicing unconditional love and acceptance. As a father with these teenagers. And what's amazing to that for me is that the more I've been in acceptance, the more I've been in an unconditional love, the more they've come back to the ideals and the values that they were instilled with, in their early years, and that I had lost faith that they would follow. Whenever I saw them making a mistake, I needed to jump on that mistake and point it out. You can't do this and all that. So it's being a father, being a parent, being a mother. It's the most rewarding role, and it can also be the toughest.
Well, I'm looking forward to that growth experience.
Enjoy these moments, my friend.
Yes. So what would you say at this point is your greatest success in life? Being the father that I am today. It was only a couple of years ago that, my kids didn't want their friends, not all of them, but my boys certainly didn't want their friends around because, dad was always, doing whatever I was doing, hammering them. And, and now I'm like the cool dad that, and the kids tell me that. They tell me that, he says, you're so cool and you're this and you're that. I'm not sure that I am cool, but I think I am. But it's really being the father that I am, to where my kids feel comfortable coming to me and telling me things that a couple of years ago they would not have been. And even, even being a confidant to some of their friends that feel comfortable, asking for advice and the struggles that they're dealing with. So that's, it's just amazing. It's just amazing. Those are, I think kids are God's greatest gifts. So far, I believe that still. I might circle back. No, I'm just kidding. I love my kids, love my wife, and I love my siblings. Oftentimes, in fact, it's kind of funny. A lot of my siblings will bring their friends over to our house even now, and they'll say, we feel the most comfortable in your house. It was interesting. I asked one of my little sisters, she had a boyfriend come over, and I was like, this is an interesting, like, I didn't have that opportunity, I don't feel like, or I didn't ever take it, where I brought significant other people to somebody else's house, like in my family, because of life circumstances, it didn't happen that I felt like that. And so I never really knew what it was like what it would be like to go into somebody else's house. Because me as a person, I feel very well, like I can walk into pretty much anybody's house and I feel like I'm part of their family because that's my energy. Mm-hmm. And it just gets reciprocated real easily. And so I'm like, I wonder what this guy feels like coming into our house. Because like in my mind, when somebody comes over, once I like shake your hand and we're good, hey, any food you can find in our house, you want to open the fridge, whatever, it's all yours. There's the cups. Like, I want to be home, right? So anyway, so I was like, what is it like coming in to this house? Like, I'm curious what the reception was like the first 2 or 3 times you came over. And he's like, well, the first time I came over and I felt like I still had to perform and be funny and whatever. And I asked him this on the third one. He's like, yeah, but by like the second time, I was able to just be me. And that was really nice. I haven't experienced that before. I was like, that's really fascinating. I didn't know. I'm just me. And I was curious what the experience was. So it's a good compliment, I think. Even if you're not cool, it's still fun to be told that you're cool.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. So what's one secret, habit, mindset, or behavior that you practice daily that you think contributes most to your success?
I do every single day of the year. I meditate in the morning and then I do yoga. And I haven't missed a day since July of 2018. And so the ability to quieten the mind, which I think meditation, a lot of people, I grew up in the Bible Belt, and so meditation was like a Hindu or it was like this mysterious thing that probably wasn't good, right? Meditation is really, for me, it's the practice of finding the present moment. It's the practice of patience. And so it's quieting the mind and finding that still moment, in the moment, and being in that moment, start the day, and really just connecting to the internal divinity and connecting to God. That's what it is for me. And then the yoga is one of the types of exercise that I do. It's the one that I've chosen to do every day. So meditation and yoga, man, I mean, it will not miss it. Started it in my late 20s, probably did it about 20% of the time for years, or about 80% of the time for 20 plus years. And then I really got clear that I wanted it to be a part of my life day in and day out, made it a part of my vision. And then, it was like October, November of 2018, I was like, I can't remember the last time I missed a day. And then I started thinking. And then I remembered, I'd gone on a trip and I didn't do it that morning because I had to get up early to go to the airport. And that was in July. And that's the power of a vision, because it's like, you don't even have to like willpower. You can just set an intention, set the vision. And all of a sudden you wake up and you realize, I'm doing this. I didn't even, it's just a part of me now.
Yeah. Love it. Okay, so here's the surprise question at the end. It's my favorite one. It's why I do this whole show. And you may have already answered it, but we'll ask it again because it may have changed after this conversation. You never know. So we're going to pretend that you've died 6 generations from now. So it's your great, 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 great grandchildren. They're sitting around the kitchen table discussing your life, the impact you had, the legacy you left on your community, your country, and the people closest to you. What do you want your great, 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 great grandchildren to be saying about your legacy 6 generations from now?
Look, I mean, so my aspirational vision, I mean, I think that we are, I think we're all, let's call us universal time travelers. I mean, we were sent here on a mission to uncover our internal divinity and our pure potentiality. And I think that in the world that we're living in right now, I think a lot of us are waking up to that internal divinity because the world has been hijacked by fear. And, and I see us waking up now. And, I would love for them to say, our great, 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 great grandfather was one of the ones that recognized the internal divinity and the pure potentiality in humans. And he was a catalyst, in the year 2021, where humanity, he helped infect the world and humanity with faith and prosperity and peace and love and joy. And it was in 2021 where the entire global planet got infected with those beautiful emotions. And since that time, we've been living in peace and prosperity and health and happiness and harmony and love and joy around the globe.
I love it. I love how big it is. That's awesome. I hope to contribute to your dream, because my mission's pretty much the same.
It's our dream, brother. It's we're all here for the same thing. We're all here on this mission together, and it's again, that's we're all here to shine the light, and to infect people with faith and get rid of this fear that's been gripping, small-minded fear that's been gripping the world for, and creating separation among humanity. And so we're all here to do the exact same thing. And man, you're doing it, and so it's an honor to be here with you. It's an honor to share. Thank you. Thanks to your listeners for listening. And Sam, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share, man. It's been a real pleasure and a real honor, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Where is the best place to get in touch with you? I failed to ask that. If somebody wanted to learn more about you or have a conversation with you, where are you most active online? Best place to connect?
So at Chuck Downs Jr., at Chuck Downs Jr. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. I've got two websites. One is downsconsulting.com. And then one is epiclifesecrets.com. And that's my 5-week course that helps people avoid the big mistake of playing life too small. So any of those places they can find me.
Love it. Awesome. And just so y'all remember, you are worth being remembered. And that's why we do this show, to help you identify what it is you're worth being remembered for. What's your goal, your dream, your passion, and then let's create some action steps to help you be remembered in the way you want to be remembered. So catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy Show.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.